Right on, a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. Sobriety date, April 8, 1989. Exciting night tonight. We'll be talking about sex and having a little, sideshow pictures after.
Oh my God! What a horrifying thought.
Anyways, we better open up with the Serenity Prayer or something.
We better open up with some prayer.
What do we need for a good meeting?
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Things that I used to say but I don't say anymore. Who are you?
Hello, everyone. I'm a recovered alcoholic, and my name is Joanne.
Hi, Joanne.
Right on. I'm going to have some fun, man. I hope everybody's doing good. We're going to have fun. I don't know about you guys, but we're going to have fun. So we're at the sex inventory, and this is, when done right, is a real pivoting direction in most of people's lives. It's a real game changer. And if you did it the way other people suggest, you missed 90% of it, right? But if you go the way the books outline, you actually start moving in a new direction, and it becomes very clear. Because what's the purpose of the fourth step? Yes, to remove the blocks, but also to, if we kind of look at page 64, and this is each section, right? We're looking for well, let's read this. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory, just to refresh our minds what this is about and what we're looking for in the conduct that we'll be addressing here shortly.
Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is disclose damaged and unsaleable goods.
So to discover, it's already there, but we're totally oblivious to it. That's like our alcoholism before, like it was there. By the time it started getting our attention, everybody already knew about it. Anybody? Then when we learned why we can't control and enjoy our drinking, it kind of made sense, right? But we would have never came up with that. Who would have came up with that sitting in the bar? Why do you drink the way you do? Well, it looks like I have the phenomenal craving. Right? It was mostly I have a methamphetamine deficiency.
My drinking buddies weren't that profound.
So here, we're going to look at the same kind of thing we're going to get certain information of why things are. They're already there. We might as well become aware of them, right? Everybody else is. Again, you'll be the last one to see what everybody else already knows, so there's no big discovery, only for you. Right? Go ahead.
If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations.
So we're looking for the flaws in our personality, makeup, thinking, outlook, whatever process that caused our failure. Most of us don't know what that is, right? Like you can guess, but mostly it's other people, right? Right? If you were dating who I was dating, or if you had my life, anybody? Right? So... Yeah.
Just brought up trains and circumstance.
Trains and circumstance, that's it. So here it's one of those things. So we look at the common manifestation. So when we went through the resentment part, it's starting to create a shift from a participant to an observer. Anybody kind of notice through that process of mastering resentments? We see how much noise there really is in the mind, what we used to kind of take comfort in. We realize we live in a noisy neighborhood. Anybody? Like right beside the airport, the tracks, and the concert hall. Before, we'd never kind of caught the level of noise, disturbance that was present because you're used to the neighborhood. But as you went through the fourth, how many people became really aware of the level of disturbance that they... No wonder I feel the way I feel. Holy shit, look what I've been thinking. Feeling, outlook, attitudes, right? And constant, the grouch and the brainstorm, anybody? The bombardment of thoughts and ideas. The brainstorm isn't, oh, great idea. It's the bombardment of thoughts and ideas, right? The bondage. Anybody have that problem? The bondage, the takeover, where you're a participant through the process. The first part of the resentment part is to see how these people, places, and things, past events, how we look at things, these values really dominate us. They eat our lunch. Anybody? We're not eating alone. Right? And so as we start going through it, we learn how to step back from it and kind of look at it. And kind of, isn't this interesting? No wonder I feel the way I feel. No wonder my outlook. No wonder I have conflict. No wonder I'm always, right? 4 horsemen, bewilderment. Anybody? So then we go through the fear process, and they start getting right to the point. And what was the best part about the fear process? Now that we got the resentment out, then we went into the fear process. What was some of the highlights of the transition that happens in the fear process? There's a transition that happens there.
How many of you were here last week when we talked pretty extensively about resentments to fears? Right? What's the transitional part when they're talking about fears? Where are we? Page 68, right? If we're talking about fears in the 4-step process, we're on page 68. And when we ask you a question, we're not asking for your observations on it. We're asking for the material that we've gone over in the book, right? So on page 68, if we're talking about fears in the 4-step, that's where we are in the book. And it shifts from talking about reviewing our fears, why we had them, right? We understand now that through the resentment process that these instincts play a really important role, right? Why are we driven by these 100 forms of fear? Many of us thought it was because of all the things that happened to us in our lives, right? But what we said last week was, no, we set that aside and we start to see that it's really these instincts that are playing a larger role, right? It's not where the fear came from, it's why it still exists. Why is it still present in present day? Why is it driving our relationships, our interactions with others, the way we conduct ourselves on a daily basis? We talked about the way fear feels, right? That ability to sort of observe it rather than participate in it. And then on page 68, they shift from talking about our fears to observing our fears and what we can do about it. It says here, perhaps there is a better way, right? A better way than what? Than being driven by these fears, right? By participating in these fears on a daily basis. We are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. This is the shift, right? Rather than trusting in ourselves to instinctively react to a situation, what do? We place ourselves unreservedly in the care of something greater than ourselves, right? And we look to it to power us through. We are in the world to play the role He assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us, and humbly rely on Him. Does He enable us to match calamity with serenity?
So what we're doing is what we read on page 64, right? Is a business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Right? Now we are able to see the things that drive us, the things that cause us problems, the things that get us initiated with other people. Right? I have a better idea of it. Because when my sponsor used to go, why are you mad at these people? I go, because they're a-holes. No, but now, on this side of the I see why. Because they threat to one of my basic instincts. They know something about me that 2 of us know that bothers me, right? Right? My sponsor used to say, the reason you don't like them is because they know the truth about you. Anybody have those people in your life?
Oh, yeah.
Nothing they did. They just know something about you you wish they didn't know. Right? And so then they talk about how it shifts our emotional state. And I never knew that before, how my thinking and these things, these pictures that go through, the reels that go through my mind, create an emotional shift. Now I see it. Before I wasn't able to see it. Anybody kind of get that kind of basis now? And then how many times do we create a shift when we looked at this exercise of, they talked about the process. Well, what's the recipe that we're hoping we learn? They're hoping we learn. What's the recipe that they're hoping we start to incorporate within our lives now? It's a hint. It's something we've gone over, and it's a conclusion to something that we finished. The conclusion means, okay, this is what we're hoping. Now we're going to move on to the next manifestation. And what are they hoping? Well, we must as well read it. It's a hot day, eh?
We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, everybody paying attention?
Yeah.
Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do.
Sorry, is this relationship started now, or is it something that's happening later?
No.
It's now, right? May you find him now,
Yeah.
right? We've tapped into it, right? So there's no resting in between the process now. Like you hear people say, okay, you finished your 4, now wait till 5, and then look at 6 and 7, do your 9s, right? When you finish your 9s, then do 10, 11. That's ludicrous. Because it's all about this power. Because if we get separated from this relationship, what's our fate? We drink again, right? And who's the only one that don't know when that's going to happen? Is us. That's why we need this daily reprieve to keep this thing at bay, right? To keep it, to enter that reprieve. And we've started that act of providence. We've started that process of being connected, right? Who's it up to develop it now? And that's what they said earlier, to the precise that we permit these things. So how you feel, how you think, and the way your life looks, guess who's permitting it now? Who wants to do the wave? We'll start over here. It's like, holy shit. I had one guy passed away. He gave me a sticker. He says, put this on your mirror. And I looked at it. You're now looking at the problem, right? So I put it on my wife's mirror. No, I'm just joking. I'm joking. She knows my wife. I'm joking.
I know you're joking because you're still here breathing.
That's right.
We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. So when do we commence to outgrow fear? At once when? At once we start to enter into this relationship. How do we enter into this relationship? We acknowledge, right, that fear is happening in the here and now, right? We apply the appropriate prayer about it. And then we recognize that this energy's got to go somewhere. Where does it go? To the betterment of somebody else. This is what it means to be of service, right? So to acknowledge, to pray about it, and to redirect that energy to the betterment of somebody else.
Which step 4 is the foundation for step 11. Right? The redirecting, the getting access. What does step 11 say? Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact, right?
Yeah.
What else does it say?
Him pray for
Only for knowledge of his will for us on.
arbiter.
When does that happen? Is that kind of not a summary of what we're reading here?
Yeah.
So here's an interesting one. How many people has had some problems this week that they've spent a lot of time thinking about, a little time praying about?
Yeah.
Right? And how many people try to figure out how God's going to solve something?
How many of you in that situation are aware that you are afraid? Think about it, really, right? Like to ruminate on something, for your thoughts to constantly gravitate back towards it, to be wondering about what the outcome of something is going to be, wonder what the decision of another person that may affect you is going to be. It may not seem like fear in the moment, but that's really what's going on. And what we're saying, right, is that, yes, the step 4 is an exercise in looking at your past, at how these various things manifest themselves in your daily life. But what we're talking about is the principle of step 11 in the here and now, right? So when do you start practicing this principle of acknowledging that fear exists in this moment and praying about it and redirecting your energy to the betterment of somebody else? Now, right? Not tomorrow, like, oh, this is a really great exercise. I'm going to get started on it in the morning. Right now.
So the funny thing is, we don't know how driven we are by these things because we're used to sitting with them. We're comfortable with them.
That's the noise in the neighborhood. We don't know a life without it.
So how many people have reoccurring thoughts about the future, about people, places, and things, relationships, reoccurring.
George, just keep
Health.
your hand up, man.
So reoccurring means I find myself visiting this thought and I'm participating in it. Yes, anybody? I'm looking at it, I'm talking to it, isn't this interesting? Right? It's changing my emotional state. Anybody? But I think it's not fear because I'm problem solving. Is it happening now? No, but I'm getting ready. That's fear. It's disguised itself to get your attention, to take you out of the moment. And when you're not in the moment, how many people ever notice when you show up at a meeting, it takes you a while for you to show up? Physically you're there, but it takes a while for you to actually show up in that meeting. Because a lot of times we sit in a meeting and all the thoughts and ideas and things that are going on in our life present themselves. Anybody have that, or is it just, right?
This is how some of our thinking can present itself as virtuous, right? Because like Tony just had a really valid point, right? Like some of us may think as we're doing this kind of stuff in our own head that we're just being due diligent, right? We're just preparing ourselves for every outcome or every possibility. But what we're doing is we're not here in the present moment, right? Doing your due diligence is being aware of when your bills are due and paying them in advance, right? Doing your due diligence is being aware of the tasks you have to do on a Monday morning at work and making sure you're prepared for them. Preparing for every possible outcome, for every possible iteration, and every person that may or may not be involved is not doing your due diligence. That's just ruminating and worrying and not being present in the moment, and it's just full of all that self-reliance. That's what driven by 100 forms. Can you imagine what's happening to your internal energy while all of that's going on? And then some friendly person who is in the moment walks into the room and is like, hey, how's it going? Fine. Because you're just vibrating at a frequency and everybody's asking you if you're okay and you're irritable because everybody keeps asking you if you're okay. Stop me when all of this sounds familiar, right?
And they don't give you the attention that you think you deserve. Now you have a problem with them because you think they have a problem with you.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody? You just take all that energy and attach it to somebody else that were minding their own business.
Start filling in the blanks of the story, creating conversations that never happened, right?
So, sorry, we're going to have a trigger alert. Fear, sorry. I couldn't help it. Fear, I'm triggered. So all that stuff, right? That's all fear-based anxiety. Like, I'm going to watch out for this. I'm going to watch out for that. I'm going to be prepared. And when this happens, that. How many people have those conversations? When this happens, that, blah, 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 blah. Zzz.
What part of the person that's having a moment like that is free? Not at all, right? Does that sound like freedom from the bondage of self? So, if being constrained to the bondage of self sounds like that noisy neighborhood that's always trying to, manage for and is filling in the blanks of this conversation, and that person looked weird at me, and they must be thinking this, and they must be thinking that. What is the opposite of that, right? What is freedom from the bondage of self? Isn't that appealing? A quieter, lower vibration neighborhood where somebody walks in the room and says, hey, and you might actually have the capacity to ask them how they're doing and actually listen, right?
This may sound weird, but I like visuals, like looking at something different. So if you had a remote control that wasn't working well and kept on turning up your stereo, would you become aware of it? Pretty quick. Like you would start. So what would you do? You'd take corrective measures right away, right? And then hopefully you take and fix it, and then you find it doing it again. It's just like anybody ever listen to a show and then a commercial comes out way louder, and then you grab the volume control, you turn it down, and that's kind of like this, but they're saying we do that with our own thinking now. We need to learn how to step back and become an observer. There's a shift happening here, right? So we grab the remote control, which is prayer, but the first thing is to acknowledge it's happening. We know what it looks like, but now instead of participate, step back from it and say, one of my powerful prayers for years was, God save me from myself and save others from me. and what do you want me to do? Dishes? Okay. Right. Go to work? Okay. Be at work, be of service, be in the meeting, be present. right? And how many times would you need to do that? Many times to stay present. So if something was happening, like I had warrants and all that for my arrest, and I used to eat my lunch, so I was taking care of those things. But what I pray for is, God, give me the ability to handle it when it's happening. Don't allow me to go through it 3 or 4 times. I like to go through things once. Most of us don't know how to go through things once. That means, is it happening now? No. So then I'll go through the emotional state as it's happening. I don't know if that kind of makes sense. Instead of anticipating going through all the emotional state now, all the emotional state later, and all the emotional state after. Anybody have that? So now you see, okay, it's not happening now. Is it happening now? No, acknowledge God. Bring me back to the moment. Where are my feet? Concentrate on my breathing. And that's what we start practicing as being an observer. So that's that part.
Oh, I forgot about that. Be where your feet are.
Be where you fear. Breathing. All that stuff may sound weird, but the first thing that happens when you're in fear is anxiety. How many people think they have an anxiety disorder? Well, you don't. You have a thinking disorder. Based on your fear, or your instincts are kind of askewed. They're not correct.
That's why a common exercise when experiencing acute anxiety is to, something you can hear, something you can see, something you can smell, right? What does it do? It brings you back into this moment. So you physically stop reacting to the thoughts you're having, right? Because the only thing that's actually creating all of this energy is your thinking, right? A lot of what you're thinking isn't even really happening.
People are going to love me for this. That's why addictions, minor addictions, are so rampant. Smoking, vaping, eating, sex. All that stuff is to cause a kind of deterrent. A shift from actually dealing. So what we mask it, right? And in masking the fear, it causes more problems. So it's not by chance that they're saying, okay, we looked at fear, now we're going to look at sex. Yay!
Yay!
And this is a pivoting point. Why is it like the first 16 years of my sobriety, we just did the Joe and Charlie way. What are your problems? What did you do wrong? And that's kind of it in the 5th step. But I never did a sane and sound idea that we're going to get into. And when I did that, the way it's laid out in here, it created a total shift in my life. Total shift, right? So let's see where we go.
Now about sex.
Yay!
Many of us needed an overhauling there. But above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It is so easy to get way off track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes, perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow a man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct.
That's a nice way of saying, mind your own business.
Yeah. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? We reviewed our conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should have been done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed.
So there's something interesting happening here. You notice there's a shift in the conversation. They're assuming you've started this relationship with your own experience with this power now. They're assuming you're doing the prayers. They're assuming you're experiencing something from the shift from the resentments, the application of the fear thing. You're starting to realize whatever you call it is secondary. Are you starting to experience a shift through the application of these principles? So here they're even starting to say, now ask. like the conversation, your buddy, whatever you want to call it, this kind of putting the energy out there to the universe, see what comes back. So on this here, this is interesting. How I understand this, how I did it, changed everything, because in this area here is kind of like we agnostics. Most of us are stuck with other people's ideas, what we think relationships are. We have a group of people say white picket fence. How many people got like they're gonna I gotta get married, I gotta get a fence, I gotta get kids. That's mostly other people's ideas. Is that what you want? No, but that's what I'm supposed to do, right? Or a lot of people get stuck on other people's ideas and they don't know what their own ideas is, right? And a lot of us have a lot of guilt, shame, and remorse around conduct, usually because of other people's ideas. So the first list is I put down just a list of everywhere that causes me shame, guilt, remorse, or reflection, whatever comes to mind. Acts or things, and they don't have to involve other people. Things that cause me guilt, shame, and remorse, or things like it, whatever comes to mind. It may sound kind of weird. So I put foster care. Does anybody know what I'm talking? I know what I'm talking about, right? Put foster care, and then I put the Greyhound bus, and I put RIO theater, and I put whatever comes to mind, like things that cause me guilt, shame, and remorse. Things that not relationships, but things that could be in a relationship, coercion, guilt, manipulation. I know nobody else has done that here, right? Reward system, punishment system. Anybody? Right? Negotiation, right? Guys do it all the time. I'm buying. Okay, I mean, you're going home with me. Okay, like on and on, like whatever your conduct is or whatever. And so some of the stuff I put down, magazines, right, or porn, right? Because when I was younger, the people I grew up with introduced me to all that stuff at a really young age. That was sex education, was pornography, real pornography. It was like, holy shit. 8.5 years old, oh my God, right? And so that created a lot of warped ideas. And then the churches, well, if you're going to go blind, I had corrective surgery, so thank God for that.
But that's where a lot of shame is injected, right? And social development, we're not going to get into all the psychoanalysis of it, but like what the first set of instructions here is we reviewed our own conduct over the years past, right? We're not making necessarily a list like we did with the resentments and fears. We're now reviewing our own conduct over the years past. Where were we selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate? Where are these areas of shame? It's not a list of people we've slept with, right? It's a list of our conduct over years past. It can include things that may not make sense to us. Right? But what do? They go in the inventory. We don't debate it. We don't question it.
Yeah, whatever comes to mind. Right? I mean, so then we're going to look at each relationship. Was it selfish or not? That's a totally different list. Right? But the first list is getting rid of all the guilt, shame, and remorse stuff. Stuff I still have attachment to. I don't know why, but there's any. If it comes to mind, there must be a reason it comes to. How many people are thinking about something right now? That's the way the system, it'll come to mind. So I just wrote that stuff down, and a lot of it was code. So I put the first name. After the list, I put the name, and then I kind of was it selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and then, yeah, that's how I create my list. Where was I selfish, inconsiderate, shit, a lot of things start coming to mind now, where I was selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate, and self-seeking. I didn't know what that looked like before. Now I know what it looks like. So you notice the last part of the resentment list is the first part of the conduct list. Right? We see I'm acting on being selfish, inconsiderate, and dishonest. I'm involving these people or this act or this thing that's causing me or other people problems. Right? So what's just interesting here is whom had we hurt? Well, this is interesting, right? So what's the simple one? I'm just trying to think of something. Okay. So the time with the sheep. No, I'm just joking. So this is how. So it was on one of my conduct was I got involved with somebody who was newer than me in recovery. We were in treatment. I wasn't in treatment. I was sober a little while. We both agreed, but it caused problems within my social group, right? My home group, the people around me, and all that other stuff. So what happens is, so was I selfish and inconsiderate? Yeah, I shouldn't have got involved with her, but I was more interested in her having a relationship with the other part of me than me. I don't know how else to say that, right? It's like, so, right? Most men, was the first thing they want to introduce you to is not their mother. Yeah, okay, now we're getting the right idea, right? But I didn't know that, right? So this person, say Brenda, but then who did I hurt? Well, I hurt Brenda, but I also hurt myself because I'm driven by these instincts, right? And also my home group, right? And her kid and all, and that one single act, right? There was a lot of repercussions from it that I never seen before. I was like, holy smokes, isn't that interesting, right? So this is kind of like, so I put all, and then I keep going through the list. And then it was one of those things is when I finish this thing, is kind of like, in early sobriety, they used to think I should go to SA, right? I was young when I got here, right? I was like finding a power greater than myself. I was driven by other things. Anybody? Yeah, some of you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, you engaged in inappropriate relationships, lots.
So, and it wasn't because I thought I had a sex problem, but I didn't have a sex problem. I had a self-esteem problem, right? It was interesting, my social and my ambition. So a lot of these relationships I was in, it wasn't to be in a relationship. It was either a protector, a provider, right? Or some, and I said, holy smokes, when you're making relationships based on that stuff, how successful are the relationships going to be? They're not, right? And so when I got rid of all the guilt and the shame stuff, then the next list was every person I've been in a relationship with. So Kim, no, it wasn't selfish because we both agreed on that relationship, right? But on the previous list, there was a lot of selfish and considered. There was a lot of stuff from. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. Even though I was in a relationship with this person, I was fine, so it wasn't selfish. But some of the acts in that relationship was selfish and considered and dishonest.
We can look at another dynamic for you ladies. Maybe the sex act doesn't even necessarily need to be a part of it, right? So those levels of inappropriate relationships that Tony just alluded to, the kinds that you enter into for protection or validation or financial security, right? And I had a lot of relationships with men that were just based in friendship. But there was always the possibility that there might be more. And it injured relationships that they were in. It aroused jealousy, suspicion. It was problematic, right? But I needed those relationships in order to engage in kind of the codependent stuff that we deal with, right? When we're out there unwell. And sometimes sex was a part of it, sometimes it wasn't, but it went on the list anyway, right? Because it was the sex instinct that was being interfered with, right? What did we do to unjustifiably arouse jealousy or bitterness? All of the people that might have been, impacted as a result of this relationship, right? Whether it be transactional or not. Does that make sense? If we are entering into an intimate relationship with somebody and we're putting whether or not we're okay in the lap or in the hands of somebody else, right? Problems arise. Does that make sense? Yeah. Maybe it's the promise of the physical act and it never occurs, but it's still damage as a result, right? And it's still not in keeping with a sane and sound ideal for your future sex life. Does that start to make sense?
So, we got this all down on paper. Where it talks about, this is interesting, right? Where were we at fault? What part did we play? All the same thing, right? What part did you play in it? Where you were at fault? All that other stuff. It says, what should we have done instead? Well, that's interesting. So we're asking now, if I was in that same situation, given the knowledge that I have, what would I do now? right? If I can go back and relive it, well, I did the best I could with what I had back then. But what would I do now is so I used to get in trouble. It started off as boy meets girl on AA campus, like, oh, we're just friends. Yes, I'll give you a drive home. Separate them from the herd, right? That's what we do. AA foreplay, right?
Because we have no idea what's going on. None.
That's right. AA foreplay.
What? You just want to give me a ride home?
So AA foreplay is you want to go for coffee?
Yeah.
Second date, I got the U-Haul. So it's interesting. So what should we have done instead? Well, how I got myself in these situations because I'd be overwhelmed with. They talk about when they yield would mean heartache over on the other page. But what should we have done instead? Well, you know what? This is what I started asking. If it was a guy asking me to do that, would I do it? Would I go all the way? Would I be that friendly? Would I be that kind? Would I be that, right? A lot of times, no. I wouldn't, right? And so when women ask me for a ride, I say, I can't give you a ride unless there's other people coming in the vehicle with us. I can't be alone with you. I'll meet you at the club, I'll meet you somewhere, but I won't meet you alone, right? And this is well before I got married. Like, especially married, ain't happening. Like, I'm not going to meet you somewhere. I'm not going to engage in phone calls with you and all that other stuff and doing all that inappropriate stuff because even though it may build your self-esteem and all that other stuff, it would be damaging because a lot of times people really don't want to have a relationship with you. They want to take you off your game to increase their self-esteem and their self-worth.
This is what we call interdependence, right? I'm going to get from you what it is that I need, right? You're going to get from me what it is that you need, right? There's a difference between entering into a relationship with somebody just because you want to share your life and experiences with them and getting into a relationship with somebody because you feel like they're going to fill up your broken pieces and you can fill up their broken pieces and, off we go in the AA camp U-Haul on our second date. Right?
So we got that all down on paper. You know what it is. You write it. It's pretty simple to write out, right? Especially the hard part is to see how. That's why you do one at a time now, and especially how our conduct has hurt other people. Like it was in it looking back, right? Like this person, Kim. I ended up making amends to her, but we were talking a little while. So she, even though we both agreed on the relationship, it was driven by addiction. Like the chaos that we'd create with the police, the ambulances, the neighbors, the neighborhood, people minding their own business. We'd involve everybody. It was brutal, right? And then how did that roll over into her mom, her sister, right? My mom, my sister, my family. Like they look at us like, like what the hell's going on, right? So there was a wide swath of damage through our chaos, right? So when they talk about in this way, and we got it all down on paper, we looked at it, and a lot of it's like, holy shit. So a lot of the stuff, if you're okay with it, that's not the point. There's the stuff that you're not okay with, the stuff that to get a different view or a different understanding. And if you need to get some outside help, like I went out for outside help at 7 years, sober for a lot of this stuff. Because it wasn't like step 6 stuff, I wasn't aware of the depths of the personality shift that I had through some of the incidents that happened to me growing up. I had a real warped sense of, and I could see it, but I couldn't kind of do anything about it. So I went for outside help for a year in one area, and then I went for a psychologist in this area just to get things settled in my mind. Because where I grew up, how I seen things and how, like, it was really, really warped, right? But I didn't know it was warped until I tried to have a sane and sound relationship, but I was still warped upstairs.
And found you couldn't.
Yeah, like there was a lot of stuff still happening up there that disturbed me. Some of you may, you know what I mean? Like, and that disturbance would create darkness, and it would create a shift within inside of me, emotional shift. And some of the stuff sober is still causing me guilt, shame, and remorse. So I'm doing things that I don't want to do. I'm not doing things that I want to do, and I don't have the power to shift it at certain times. So it's causing me problems, right? Like first 16 years. When I got to this part, in this way we tried to shape a sound and sane idea, is I was 16 years sober, and I'm going down, I'm driving my bike, and I'm thinking, I said, God, I said, if this is your will for me, right, these relationships I'm in, could you make the next one a lot less painful, because I can't take it. Like, I just can't take it anymore. What I was I was doing this, but I was blind to how these same situations would be a reoccurring theme in my life, right? Like, it was like, oh my God. So when I did this sane and sound idea, I was able to move toward it, right? And that's how I met my wife. Like, I met my wife 3 months into this recipe, right? So I went from total despair, total collapse, to bringing God into it. I had a sane and sound idea. I went from fast food. That's how my relationship, fast food. I don't know how it's drive-through recovery. I don't know how it's, there's no preparation. Everywhere you go in, you know what you want, and there's no building of relationship. And then there's the Christmas. You know, Christmas where there's preparation, you don't eat, you go, and it's just a whole experience. And you know what I'm talking about? Big difference. And if you eat before you go to the family dinner, are you going to have, I don't know how else to say that, right? Are you going to enjoy the family dinner?
Oh, yes.
Well, you're not. You're not going to enjoy the family dinner because you've ruined the opportunity. And that's what I was doing in my life. I was never able to fulfill what I was looking for because of my character defects, flaws, and the inability to see how I caused my problems. So I'm doing Burger King. So I want, instead of a 1-star, 2-star kind of experience, I want a 5-star experience. I want, like, to go out and, a 5-star experience, nice table, everything. It's an experience.
Let me frame that up. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? This is what Tony's talking about, right? Like, the idea of just ripping through the drive-thru and getting the meal over and done with is incredibly selfish, right? What is that doing? That's only fulfilling whatever it is your immediate need is in this moment, right? The idea that you would engage in a meal for nourishment, for sustainability, for all of, that's a different experience, right? To have concern for the other person in the relationship. What is their experience? How are they experiencing our interactions with each other, right? Rather than just, it's all about me, it's all about what I need, give me what I need, when I need it, I'm out, right? But a lot of our past relationships, when we go through this exercise, might look like that, right? What could I, even the ones that we feel perhaps maybe we were treated unjustifiably in, right? If we really look at it, where were we selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate, right? Did we enter into this relationship because we saw something that we could get for ourselves? Is this how we set the ball rolling, right?
So in this way, we try to shape a sane and sound idea for our future sex life. So if I want a different experience, I need to learn how to do things differently. Right? So most of my relationships were based on the idea if I'm having sex, the relationship's okay.
Yeah.
If I'm not having sex, there's a problem in the relationship. What's the problem? Okay, we're good now, let's have sex. Right? Like I don't know if most men or most people are like that. So it caused a lot of problems, right? And under the understanding, well, if I don't get what I need here, then
I'm going to get it somewhere else.
I'm going to get it somewhere else. So how enriched of a relationship is that going to be when you treat it like a disposable VCR kind of drive-through kind of?
And that doesn't necessarily just go for the sex act itself. It's the intimate relationship that you may or may not have with men. May go somewhere else for the physical act, but women have a tendency to go somewhere else for the emotional act, right? We start having inappropriate relationships with other people in order to have our needs met that aren't being met over here, right? We stop giving. Is all of this sounding a little familiar, right? We ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. So how do we mold a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life? In the last column, in column 5, it says, where could we have done harm in these various instincts again? But we ask God to mold our ideas. What should we have done instead, right? It's the same recipe to acknowledge, right? To apply prayer, right? To redirect our energy to something new, something that's never been attempted before, right? If my new sane and sound ideal for my future sex life, I don't want it to look the way my past has. It needs to be something different, right?
Whatever. No, that's the next word here.
Whatever our ideal turns out to be. Exactly. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. That's easier said than done, right? Because it's easy to just catch a burger at Burger King, right? Than it is to go for a nutritional, sustainable meal, right?
See, there's a clarification because a lot of us are very manipulative, but we don't know how manipulative we are because we're driven. We find that sex has very little to do with it. It's mostly our instincts and looking for security or some form of escape or some form of security, personal ambition, right? So this is really interesting. The next kind of, I'll get into it in a second. We will read this. It's interesting.
We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it.
So this is interesting. So we're learning how to do step 11. We're in counsel here. So about each specific, so this is changing. For each person, it changes. So there's a time I thought I wanted relationships. So, right? But I didn't want a relationship. All I wanted was the stuff, all the benefits of the relationship. But I'd lie about wanting a relationship. But I didn't want a relationship. But I was afraid if I didn't say I wanted a relationship, I wouldn't get what I wanted. Anybody? And it's the same the other way. I know people, so the other way when I was raising my kids, I said I want a single parent. I didn't want to, like having a revolving door come through my place. So I'd look for somebody that was also a single parent to hang out with, and I'd be honest about it. I'm not looking for a relationship. I'm looking for someone to hang out, do some adult stuff, have some company, and kind of and raise my kids without introduction. That's the honest approach. Now when I see they're saying, yeah, me too, but their motive is hopefully I'll change. Hopefully I'll change my idea.
No woman in this room knows what Tony is talking about, right?
I can change him.
Well, not change. We'll change the idea. He'll fall in love with me, and then.
No, that's what I mean.
Oh yeah, and so when you start seeing that, you could leverage that, or you could be honest, say, hey, you know what? This is not like I told you. I'm not into this. That's the honesty, right? The harm would be to leverage it and to utilize it, but not be invested. Right? Because there's other people, like we live in 7 billion people on this planet. There's people who are looking for exactly what you're looking for. But you need to be honest, not manipulating, coercing, and dishonest, right? To be honest means, hey, you know, I'm not looking for a relationship. Hey, you know what? I'm looking for a relationship that involves a couple people. Right?
Yeah. I mean, we live...
As long as you're honest about it.
We live in a day and time where all types of relationships are now socially acceptable, right? And we're not here to tell anybody what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable. You know when you're hurting somebody, right? Unless you're a psychopath, you know when you're hurting somebody.
Or lying.
You know when you're leveraging, you know when you're being manipulative, you know when you're just engaging in something to make you feel better, right? But you're communicating to this person that you're invested in this relationship, but really it's just about you making you feel better. Right? We're very highly motivated about feeling better. this looks like somebody that could make me feel better, right? This looks like something that could make me feel better. And is it selfish or not? It's a very simple question, right? I mean, it's not complicated when you think about it in terms like, is what I am about to do selfish or not? If it's not selfish if you're being honest about what your motives are, right? And what the end game is for you. But you have to be willing to grow towards that.
So a recap is getting rid of the stuff that causes guilt, shame, and remorse. You know, some of the stuff you're thinking about while we were talking, the stuff that keeps reoccurring, same like it's the same exercise as we agnostics. Finding peace with the things that and keeping them in the past and not allowing them to dictate my kind of conduct anymore, right? And what are the things that cause me or other people harm, right? I'm aware of these things now and how it causes other. And then the next is all the relationships I've been in. Was it selfish or not, right? And so, geez, it was brutal. Like I never was totally unaware of how calloused or like totally psychopathic I was. Like I had no idea to the level of you know, like when
complete disregard for the experience of others.
My like I love my wife. She's phenomenal. When I met her through this process, that was a God thing. Like I have no doubt that God put her in my life. Like how we met and all that. Because half an hour early, I was praying. I was coming back from White Rock. I was talking to my buddy about what was going on, and I said, you know, I kind of been a little while now. I haven't been engaging. I have no fast food. I've been building for the 5-star, right? For the 5-star experience. Like I want, like got family dinner. I'm not going to eat nothing today. I'm good. So that way, when I meet the person, they're already at that level because they're looking for. So we attract the same energy. I don't know if that kind of makes sense. The same kind of relationship. So I was coming through the valley, and I said, God. I said, this is the first time I did this in 16 years because I thought I was successful in relationships because I had a lot of them. So that would, just like same with work, I thought I was successful because I'd get all these things. But the pain I'd caused myself, so I was coming through the valley and they talk about it when to yield when the heart. And I said, okay, God, I seen what I can do. Let's see what you can do. That's not running out of my nose. I'm driving my Harley, tears running down, beautiful night. Okay, God, I had it. I give up. Let's see what you can do. And I met my wife half an hour later. My buddy said, hey, let's go over here. I'd never been over there. He said, let's go to this coffee. Sometimes God works through other people. I went to the Punjabi meeting. I was at the Starbucks shop. She came walking by, and it was like, wow. When she got out of the car, she lit up. And so this is very important. When she walked by, I said, hey, what's the matter? You don't say hello anymore? I acted like I knew her, right? And then so she seen the bikes, right? She said, in her mind, player, right? So she was returning some videos. And when she came back out, I wrote down my name and number on a card because I didn't have it. And to see where she is, so I stopped. She stopped to talk to me. And she says, oh, I got somebody at home. I said, lucky guy. Have a good night. I wasn't dogging it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Right? I said, have a good night. And she said, no, it's my mom. She's not feeling well. I'm hanging out with her Saturday night. I got some videos and stuff. I said, well, then in that case. I said, here's my number, name. Redeemable at any Starbucks in my presence, right? And then we got together for our first date, and we talked about spiritual, where we at, where we want to go, and whether we're both on the same page. And it took her 2 weeks to call me. That's not an AA relationship. Right? AA relationship, we would have been married that night.
You would have left in the U-Haul from the Starbucks parking lot.
That's it. And so as we were dating and courting, as we were going along, we were getting to know each other first, which is opposite from all my other relationships. And so one of the things is kind of funny. Like she sat me down. She goes, "Could we talk?" So you know my wife's type A personality, smart as well. So she had this little binder with all these fobs in it. Like, what do you call those? Sticky notes? Mm-hmm. Tabs, little thing. She goes, I've been doing some research online. She goes, it's come it's been brought to my attention you're not very good at relationships. So what makes you say that? She says, the way you handle yourself. She says, I really care about you. I really like to see this work. She says, I've covered 16 points here that I think would really enhance our relationship. I looked at her and I said, what planet are you from, man? I said, you're right out of your mind, lady. And I left, right? I said, you're nuts, right? So I'm happy to report we've covered 15 of the 16 items. We've been together 18 years, but married 15. What's important here is that where was I going with this? Whatever our ideas turn out to be is when I go to fall short, I ask God to direct me toward where I want to go and where I want to be and how I want that relationship to look like. Does that kind of make sense? So if you're in a relationship, you could turn the whole thing around by involving your partner into what we're doing here. What's a sound idea for you? What does it look like? How does that work? So I know where I was going. I used to say this all the time. There was been a problem. I'll be back in a second. She goes, whoever it was, where are you going? I said, I'm going to go get some boxes. There's no way you can carry all this shit out in your hands. I'd end it just like that. Just over. Done. And then they'd be crying and I'd be totally oblivious to their pain or anything like that, right? But when my wife, oh my God, I went to go meet. So prayer is very important, right? So I was going to end this relationship with a woman that knew all about me. So I was praying. I said, God, what do I do here? So there was a guy named Milton back in the day, right? And he was married. He was happy. Had all kinds of kids, grandkids. And something
Full
said,
life.
Huh?
Full life.
Full life. Something said, phone Milton. I never phoned Milton. I've never phoned Milton. Why would I phone Milton? I phoned Milton. The line was busy. I said, I've done that. He says, something said again in here. Phone again. So I phoned and I said, asking for direction here, what we should do. Right? I said, hey, Milton, you've met my wife. I'm thinking on ending this relationship. He goes, let me get this right. He says, you met a woman that knows all about you. She loves you. She cares about you. And she thinks the world of you, and you're going to leave her. I said, yeah. He says, what are you, a loser? I said, what did you say? He says, you deaf too? I'm on the phone. But this is important, right? So it kind of tuned me up, and then he said, listen to this. He put the phone in the air. He says, listen to this. And there was kids, his wife, his whole family was all around him. He says, you hear that? He says, what do you hear? I said, I hear you. He says, why would you rob yourself of that opportunity? I started crying. First time I started crying that I got penetrated internally at 16 years sober. And then I went to meet my wife who thought I was leaving. So when I seen her bubble up, it pierced my heart. And I knew I never wanted to make her feel like that again. That's what this process done. It brings you into a place that whatever you want, you'll create. With or without this recipe. So if you've been happy doing what you're doing, then keep doing it. But if you're not and you're looking for something pretty remarkable, I know your relationships have gotten pretty remarkable for a woman in your mental condition.
Yeah, I have a great marriage.
Jesse's a phenomenal guy.
He is a very phenomenal guy, yes. We got to know each other after we'd been married for 10 years.
Well, and that's it. Wherever you're at, you bring this recipe into the relationship with you, and you could redefine what that looks like. You start having business meetings, you both...
That's exactly what we did, right? We had to build a relationship inside a marriage as if we had just met, right? We had to start from the ground up. But it is possible to do that if you're both willing to grow towards a sane and sound ideal, right? And I brought this home to him, and I said, can we work on this together, right? And some of that is a part of the amends process, and we'll talk about that at length when we get there. But it is possible to repair relationships so long as you are both willing.
And next week we're going to get into some of the really cool stuff as the recipe of the summary, a finishing of the conclusion of these things, the manifestation of self and the redirecting. So finish that off this week, and next week will be even more fun. Live long and prosperous. May the force be with you.
Tradition that helps us pay for the rent on the room, the big books that you guys take and don't bring back, the worksheets, all that kind of good stuff. If you're in a position to contribute, great. There's no dues or fees in Alcoholics Anonymous, so if you're not in a position, that's fine too.
Yeah, we could use some books. A lot of them go south. I don't know where they go.
Let's close it up to the third
Let's
step.
do the third step prayer. What do we need for a good life?
God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help, of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
And the worksheets are also online in the Big Book Study Workshop for those who are looking for it.
Thanks, guys.
Right on, I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. Welcome to the Thursday night Big Book Study Workshop with the program of recovery. How we open this meeting now is with the third step prayer to get us kind of mind right. So what do we need for a good life? God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. Thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. So I've had a fun week disturbing a lot of people online. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting. You talk about the book, it seems to disturb people. I don't know if anybody's ever noticed that, but first you have to know what the book says and have an experience with it in order to have that level of effectiveness, eh?
Sure.
Sure, why not? So it's really funny how if you kind of look at the design, we've already read through it and made a decision to go through with it. That's the design of this. When you're working with somebody, ask them to have a look at it, right? Kind of have an overlay of what's expected of them, right? Like Bill did sitting at the kitchen table. His friend talked about the course of action he did, and the experience was evident, right? And Bill seen it was only a matter of doing what he did to obtain the same experience his friend was having. What was that? Finding a solution, enabling him not to drink under any and all conditions. Because what was Bill doing before? Drinking under any and all conditions. He didn't even need a condition. Right? Just any time was a good time to have a drink. I don't know if there's anybody like that here, but I swore it off forever. That was yesterday. That was a little overreaction, right? So one of the things that kind of, which is kind of mind-boggling, but then again, it'd go with sponsorship and where you learned the information, whether you learned it in treatment, whether you learned it from somebody who really didn't understand the process themselves because they haven't gone through it, or 12 and 12 based recovery, right? So there's hope. But if you kind of look at the book, the whole purpose of the book is to get access to power, right? Because lack of power is our dilemma. Right? So it's like getting hydro in your house, right? How long could you afford not to have hydro? Lots seems to go wrong when you don't have hydro, right? It's like there's a lot of stuff that starts seriously going wrong. The freezer, deep freeze, the comfort of life, all that other, especially if it's winter, right? It becomes very evident really fast that you have lack of power is your dilemma, right? And same with summer if it gets extreme. So the comfort of being access to power, we see that in our homes, right? It's kind of, and it becomes really evident when we don't have it, yes? Right? And that's why they got all those safety devices, like now alarm clocks with batteries in it, right? Because how many people went to sleep, set their alarm clock, the power went out and the alarm clock went out, right? You slept right through. And that's kind of like our recovery, right? Unless we need like a backup system to keep us in tune and keep us kind of charged and aware of stuff that's going on. And then also a backup resource, right? And so when you look at Bill's story, it kind of has the outlet. And you have these people, like God bless them, the steps are in number and in order for a reason. Well, they just told you they don't understand the purpose of the steps. Right? We do 1 to 9 and 1 to 9 does this, and we do 10 to 12 and it does that. No, it's as the result of all the steps. Because if you could get any kind of effect by doing a couple steps, how many people would only do a couple steps? If I can get the 9-step promises by only doing 9 steps, I won't, so a lot of people really don't understand and poor sponsorship, right? It's kind of like, really, if you think about it, those of us who have been through it, if you were able to do your 9s without 10, 11, and 12, right? If you're able to do your 9s without 10, 11, and 12, when you're done your 9s, you won't need 10, 11, and 12, will you? right? That's the whole idea. The whole idea is stay connected to this. And the fourth step is the foundation of step 11 in the whole process, right? The purpose of step 4 is what? Hi, Joanne.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good, good.
It's been a while. It's always a pleasure seeing you sober.
It's a pleasure being sober. Hello, everyone. I'm a recovered alcoholic, and my name is Joanne. So many of you have been here for the last few weeks. Who can tell us what is the purpose of step 4? We've gone over it and over it and over it. There's got to be an expert by now in this room.
Searching the fearless.
Transfer resentments.
Well,
That's a part of it.
Years and gaining access to power.
so that's it, getting access to power, right? Because lack of power is our dilemma, yes? Mm-hmm. We got to get this relationship, yes? Where and how were we to find this relationship? That's what this book is about, right? So the top of 64 that you're referring to, is that what you were referring to?
What do you mean? When I asked what the purpose of step 4 is?
Yeah.
You asked first.
It's going to be one of those meetings.
Yes,
Hey,
it
okay,
is.
put them up, put them up. I'm going to talk to Yvonne about you.
Tell her to give me a call. We have things to discuss.
So we see is to remove the blocks, right? To stand in the way of access to this thing. And so the summary of what we're hoping to achieve is in the first part of this. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. It's going to teach us about a fact-facing, fact-finding process. It's going to teach us about the truth about the stock and trade and our value system, how we look at things, right? And how it's defeating us, right? All these things. It's going to teach us a different view, a spiritual angle to this thing, instead of having our way of looking at things like page 62, right? We're sure other people are more to blame for our situation, right? Driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion, and the alcoholic's an extreme example of self-will run right. We don't usually think so, right? Anybody? Now, where we are in the process, we're starting to get a good look at what's the main source of our problem is self-directing self, instinct-based living. Yes? So we see we need to get this mechanics or these working parts of the mind. So the first part of it is we need to search out the flaw in our makeup, what's caused our failure. So we'll look at some of the common manifestations. They're going to look at some of the common things. And once you get the recipe, then you'll be able to see all the other things. Does that kind of make sense?
The common manifestations of what?
Self and self.
Right. Like how am I showing up in my daily life, right? What are those common manifestations? What do they look like? We talk about resentments first. And you were saying in your response to, what is the purpose of the 4th step is about access to power. They break it down in what is the result of that, right? We can see that these resentments must be mastered, and they give us this process on how to accomplish that, right?
Which is page 66, right?
On page 68, they go through fears. What is the purpose of going through the inventory of fear? To commence to outgrow fear. How do we commence to outgrow fear? By involving this relationship, right? It's about access to this power. It's not about us solving us with us, right?
So the more access you get to this power, the more of experience you have it, how many problems will you have with self then? None. So a lot of people say, selfish and considered dishonesty. That's the human dilemma. Watch any kids that are interacting with each other. They're selfish and considerate. That's just the human nature, right? That's not alcoholism, right? So what they're talking about here is not alcohol. They're talking about the human traits. What's killing us is what? What's the first thing?
Self-centeredness.
How about resentments?
Feedback.
So we'll look at the common because self can't really see self, so we need to see what it looks like. So the first thing is resentments. Anybody was surprised how many resentments they had? And so then the second thing was fears. But what started happening in the fear process that wasn't happening in the resentment, the beginning of the resentment process?
Letting go.
Well, we covered it, we'll do it again just for fun, eh?
Okay.
Shits and giggles.
Yeah.
Because this is kind of
Question again?
what's the transition that happens in the fear part that wasn't available before? Like, we started the resentments.
Yeah.
We went through the resentment process. Now we're in the fear process. There's a transition that's happened. There's a shift,
Yeah.
right? And what's the shift?
Basis.
Hmm?
The basis?
Well, we got access to power.
Okay.
We're getting access to power now, right?
It says on page 68, perhaps there is a better way. We think so, for we are now on a basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. Where did we start to develop that?
By putting pen to paper.
In the process of looking at our resentments, right? In the previous page, on page 67, they give us this new principle to apply, right? Though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. What do we do next?
Yes, go on.
We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience. What are we involving now? Right? We're observing and acknowledging what's really going on, right? That these resentments are not a result of the things that happen to us. They are the result of what's going on internally, right? The instincts, right? These instinctive drives, social, sex, ambitions, all that stuff. And we see that it really these resentments really dominated us, right? And they give us this principle of being able to involve this relationship now. By the time we roll around to fear, what Tony's asking is, what is the transition now, right? And they're telling us what the transition should be at this point. We are now on a basis of what? You guys have the books in front of you. It's on page 68. It's not
Everybody on
a
page
guessing
68?
game, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
We even gave you the answer
Yeah.
twice.
So what basis are we on now when we get started on our fears? Right. So what is the transitional element that we have now that we didn't have when we got started in the fourth
Some
step?
access to power?
We trust infinite God rather than our infinite self.
Okay, everybody's here now. Good.
Good. Yeah. Let's do a little wave, okay? Glad to see you guys finally showed up 15 minutes into the meeting.
I know that the workshop probably seems like the Thursday night ritual of being able to sit and not having to worry about being called on. And you guys just get to sit back there and listen to us. But this is a workshop, right? It's our intention for you to leave here with more information than you had when you got here.
How many people has looked at a recipe to do something? Like cook, recipe, instructions? How many people has read it, then went to the stove and went, what was that again? And went back to the instructions? Or did you go, let me guess 4 times? No, you go back to the instructions, yes? And that's kind of like the principle here. It's like, it's not, getting back to, okay, what does this say? What's the purpose? So looking at things different, because most of us look at 4 steps the way we were told by other people. But the purpose, we see the purpose of the 4 is to start us to have our own experience with this power. So it's the entrance to this relationship. The continuation is step 11. When I tell people step 4 is the basis for step 11, they lose their shit. Well, they just told you they don't understand step 4. Because step 4 is the entry to this relationship. Step 11 is the continuation of everything we learned in 4 and the development of what? This relationship, this outline.
Additionally to that, right, there's a principle contained within step 12, right, where you begin carrying this message, the message, right, to other alcoholics, working with others. So you can't transmit something you don't have. Right? Are you going to be the type of sponsor that bases your opinion to somebody whose life depends on the recovery from alcoholism to be able to experience this shift? Or are you going to be able to say to yourself, you know what, I can't quite remember the language, but I know it was on page 68, right? This is not about being an expert on everything. It's about knowing where the information is, right?
Yeah, like I still use my GPS. Right? And the times I don't, I seem to be doing a lot of loops of the area. I know it's here somewhere. Right? So, and if you go back to step 3, what they talk about here, right? That I may better do thy will, take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with thy power. So it's the access to this power. It's not the mechanics of the steps. There's a lot of people who could do the mechanics of the 4th step, and have an intellectual kind of understanding of the mechanics of it, but they don't have the experience it's designed to bring about. Does that kind of make sense? So we're getting access to this power. The whole foundation to this thing is the shift that happens in 4, the confirmation in 5, right? And the continuation through the rest of it. Like it's not a 9-step, it's a 12-step program. We need to get to practicing these principles.
It's interesting, actually, that you just mentioned the 3rd step prayer. It's the way we opened the meeting. You know, like setting aside the sort of wistful language and the thous and the thys, like you really need to consider what it is that it's saying, right? That you're offering yourself over to this power, right? To do with you as it would have you, like to make you into what it would have you be, right? Can you be made into something that a power greater than yourself would have you be if you're still full of all of this fear, this resentment, this inappropriate conduct, this need to make yourself feel better at the expense of other people, right? Is it starting to make sense, right? If we're making a decision in step 3 to go through a change, right? We need to be rid of some of the shit that makes us who we are today, right? So it makes sense that the inventory would be about, right, the manifestation of self, right? These things that we need to be rid of promptly and without regret, right? Because we cannot be changed into what this power would have us be in the principle of an 11th step or even a 12th step, right? If we're still full of and driven by all of these resentments, fears, and inappropriate conduct. Is it starting to melt together a little bit?
And I think that's where the courage comes in.
Well, and to go through this, ask for help. Step 3, we're asking for help. Right now, when we go over to step 4 on page 68, we're engaged in this relationship. Like there's a partnership happening here. There's something happening where you're asking for specific things, right? And so what's really cool here, so perhaps there's a better way. We'll cover that and then we'll go to where we are because it kind of follows.
For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. See how that matches together with the statement in the 3rd step prayer? We are in the world to play the role he assigns.
So which is interesting, if you look at step 11, it says sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as will, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. The steps are not designed to take a year to go through them. They're supposed to be done in a pretty rapid succession. Right? But we want to get this mental kind of apparatus of understanding like it's a thesis or thesis shit. Sorry, reel me in. You know, is this like, instead of the experience, it's not my knowledge of the steps, it's my experience with this power that creates this shift of the freedom of the bondage. My space that I live in, I seem to be enjoying it more. Right? Maybe 2 hours out of a day when it was only 2 hours of the week. Is that progress? And that's the whole idea here, right?
If you actually look at it in terms of what Tony is saying, that the 4th step is the foundation for what is practiced in the 11th step, think about this common language. We are in the world to play the role he assigns. Do we know what role we've been assigned in our 4th step? God, no, right? Like in our 11th step, when it says, every day is a day in which we can bring into our daily lives, right? What this power would have for us, right? Think about the common language between these 2 steps, right? It's setting you up for the ability to be able to engage in a relationship at a level that's moment to moment, all day, every day, for the rest of your lives. At the beginning of the meeting, we were talking about, we've always talked about chronic relapsing, and I was talking to somebody this week about the amount of times they've relapsed, the amount of times they've attempted the steps in various ways. And people always end up overanalyzing after a relapse, right? Well, you must have missed something in your 4th step. And I put it to you that as a fellowship, we communicate these steps as if they're something that are done once, right? Never to be necessarily repeated. And although we don't necessarily go through the steps the way we go through them now, they are now principles that need to be practiced on a daily basis. How do we do that? We look to our 11th and 12th step for that. We don't look to the entirety of the steps, right? But if we communicate to people that, you know, this is something that's just done once, and now you just get to hang out in the fellowship and talk about recovery, but not actually practice any principles in all of your affairs, there's something missing from that experience, right?
It's like how many people drive now or know how to drive? When you first learned how to drive, it was pretty tedious, right? It seemed like so overwhelming. But now that you've have your license or know someone with a license, they're pretty comfortable driving. Most people are pretty comfortable driving. Like they keep certain principles in check, and then when they keep those principles in check, they seem to do all right, right? And even some people even watch out for other people, right? Defensive driving, and that's kind of like this thing. You can see things coming before they happen. Does that kind of make sense? If you were in a car with somebody and they say, well, what step am I working? Oh, yeah, I'm working braking. You can drop me off over here. I'm going to take the bus, right? Or if they had the manual open up and say, fast, turn to page 15. What was on there again? Oh, yeah, turn left. Right? You get what I'm saying, right? It becomes a natural working part of the mind. But when you get jammed in, you go back to the recipe. Right? Okay, go ahead.
This is the first place in the book they start to introduce this idea, right? That we don't need to be driven by our fears anymore, right? We can actually move forward into this moment, into the next moment, and the moment after that without being driven by fear, right? With the comfort and security of knowing that we're engaged in a relationship that's much more powerful than any one of our fears, right? And they do that by introducing this, we are in the world to play the role he assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him. Does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We're going to do that for the first time in our fear inventory, right? We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. Are we asking him to come up with specific solutions to what we think our problems are and all of our... No, right? It's not a genie in a bottle. What we're asking is that we're not going to be governed by it anymore. Does that make sense? At once, we commence to outgrow fear.
So we all, see, it was funny, everybody's so hell-bent on creating their own God, right? Like, my God, my understanding. No one gives a shit about your understanding. That's your own personal thing. What it is do you have access to this power that creates the change? That's what we all agree on, collectively. Right? Lack of power is our dilemma. We need to get power. That's universe. We all agree on that. What you call it is your business, none of my business. Right? So when you're sitting in a meeting, well, my understanding, we know what your understanding is. Welcome. Here's your white chip. Right? So it's kind of like 24-hour chip. Right? So anyhow, it's kind of, do I got access to this power, and am I experiencing change? Am I to overcome these things? So now what's really cool is you're able to be an observer of your thinking, where before you were a participant, right? And you're able to see a shift, and then what we're learning without realizing is the pause, which goes into step 11. When agitated or doubtful, we pause, right? When we don't know which way to go, we pause, pray, all that other stuff. So now we got this prayer. So we did the sex part, had a cigarette, and then we moved on. Oh, God. Okay. So here,
I mean, if you're going to make it weird, make it all the way weird.
So it's kind of like, there's a shift here without people realizing it, is the first part we reviewed our conduct is over the past. The past. Then there's a shift to the future, right? But it has to do with what's happening today.
We couldn't engage in this exercise if we were still governed by fear of the future and anchored to our past and our resentments, right? This is why we don't start looking at our relationships first, right? We look at our resentments first. We look at our fears first. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Now we have the recipe to deal with being anchored to our past and our fear of the future. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
So page 69, I think Bill had a sense of humor, but we'll leave that. Anyway, we'll leave it alone. Okay. So we reviewed our sex content. Next paragraph. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound idea for our future sex lives. We subjected each relationship to was it selfish? Here, we ask God to mold our ideas. That's the beginning of meditation, asking and meditation. You're asking something specific and you're waiting for an answer that will arrive at you, and you'll understand what it is. I don't know how to explain it, but when I ask for something and something comes to me, I understand it without there isn't a whole conversation, but there's this little where it explains it to me. Like, I understand what it's saying, right? So we ask God to mold our ideas, right, and help us to live up to them. Then it goes out, whatever our ideals turn out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. So down here where I want to go, let's start with that.
Where?
Whatever our ideals turn out to be.
Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem.
So here, any other problem. It's a universal recipe. A lot of people think it's just, this is the recipe that they're trying to teach us that becomes a working part of the mind that we develop in 11, but we learn in 4. Right? This relationship has started. Yes, you're in communication, but we're not at step 11 yet. The steps are in order for a reason. Like, just follow the bouncing ball. Will you participate in the saving of your own life? Grab the life preserver, for God's sake.
To be even more practical and reasonable about it, you could take these pages and put them side by side with the pages on step 11 and draw direct parallels between the information that we're being provided. So it's not a matter of debate, right? It's clearly right here in black and white. How could we possibly be set up to successfully practice an 11th step, a nuanced, complex 11th step, right, where we engage in this relationship, if we weren't set up to be free of our resentments, right, free of our fears, right, and able to approach our sex life with a sane and sound ideal and a recipe for involving a relationship greater than ourselves, right, and approaching it the same way we would any other problem, right? We are being given a repetitive recipe for being able to approach any one of our human problems. Is that starting to clear up? Okay, good.
And it seems to be a theme. My friend promised when these things were done, I'd have the elements of way living that answered all my problems. Lack of power without was my dilemma, right? Will answer all my problems once I get. So here, where they talk about, they say, let's not be specific just about any problem that we have. We could apply the same recipe that we're going to incorporate here. Here's the outlay of what we're hoping that you'll start doing in your life, right? So if you have a problem or, right, sex or any other problem, here's how we deal with it now. Ready? How many people like that idea? Here's how any other problem you have. Any problem. Lack of sex. Pray for it. It's like, if you're having a problem with sex, read page 96 later. Okay, go ahead. So here it is. In meditation.
In meditation, we ask God that what we should do about each specific matter.
Doesn't matter if it's just any problem that we have, but here we're just dealing with sex. Could be relationships, doesn't even have to be, could be friendships, it could be any intimate relationship, work, anything that seems to still be eating our lunch or having a problem with. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
What happens next? Will it?
Your house is
There's always an if, right?
Biggest word in the book.
If you want it, right? How many of us would like to just sort of stay in our delusional state about certain things? Right? How many of us just sort of stay in that delusional state? This is where good sponsorship comes in, right? Because it's like, a solitary self-appraisal is often insufficient, right? The right answer will come if we want it. Where is the answer coming from? Where is this relationship?
Inside.
Right? It's not it's deep down within, right? It's that voice that we talked about in We Agnostics when we tried to draw some parallels between our common stories about times where we just felt something deep down within tell us that we shouldn't go in a place, we shouldn't be where we are, we shouldn't get in a car, whatever, right? That's what we're talking about, is listening to this intuition deep down within. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice.
Yeah, in other words, if you don't have that experience with that specific problem, mind your own business and get someone. When you're asking people for advice, you should be asking, did you have this experience? If they said no, then you're getting opinions. It's not about sharing opinions, it's about sharing experience, strength, and hope. If I've never had that problem, I would find you somebody that did. Probably Joanne. No, go ahead.
I cannot confirm or deny about my experience level in this subject.
So here we go. So we have an idea, not only about our sex conduct, but our life, how we want our life to be. Anybody have a rough idea what they want their life to be? Relationships, what they're hoping for, engage, or either be kids, family, neighbors, community, your whole life, right? But especially with partnership and intimacy, right, seem to be most downfall, because either we're engaged in too much of it or we rob ourselves from it. Anybody ever rob themselves of happiness here? So either way, it goes both ways. By staying out of relationships because you're afraid to get in them, do you rob yourself? And overindulging in them, do you have problem in the relationship? So,
What are you looking at me for?
I didn't want you to feel left out. Okay, go ahead.
Everybody's getting a bit sensitive.
We better move on. Suppose
we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we are going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives, right? What's the first question we ask ourselves in this exercise? Is it selfish or not, right? Are we waiting for God to be a booming voice from the sky and tell us that we're doing something wrong? No, we take our inventory, right? The next thing we do is involve God, right? But it's up to us to assess whether or not this is selfish. But if we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. Why? Because this is about growing along spiritual lines. It has absolutely nothing to do with being perfect at all times.
And what's interesting in that is, still, even sober or married or whatever, human relationships, if you're engaged in things that still causing you guilt, shame, and remorse, or shame, right? Still causing you problems, or doing things that you don't want to do, or right? Does that kind of make sense? Anything that causes you discomfort.
If you're doing things that don't align with your sane and sound ideal, right? This was the beginning of the exercise, right? In this way, we in what way? The previous, is it selfish or not? Where were we inconsiderate? Where we were anything that doesn't align with that sane and sound ideal, right? Because we're asking God to help us grow towards that ideal. And anything now that doesn't align with that ideal likely will make you uncomfortable, right? Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, and so just as an example, right? So where I grew up and all that other stuff, there's a whole bunch of things going on, blah, blah, blah. I had a lot of different ideas that weren't based on my ideas. And I was engaged in a lot of different things that didn't cause me to caused a bit of shame, guilt, and remorse, but made me feel good, made me feel bad, right? So let's just say one on a sane and sound idea for me was watching hardcore porn, right? Because it create an erotic kind of escape, but then it cause guilt, shame, and remorse, right? And then I wouldn't be available for my partner because I was engaged in activity over here that I should have been.
Is it selfish or not, right? Mm-hmm. Does it start to make sense?
So for me, I put hardcore porn, right? strip clubs, all these things. I didn't want to no longer be a part of that because I know the lifestyle behind that, right? Behind that stuff, right? So I stayed away for a long period of time. But then every once in a while, when I wasn't feeling good spiritually, I'd be looking for my own solution. Anybody?
Oh, yeah.
And so I'd be engaged in part of me would say, I don't want to do this, but I didn't have the power or the connection to stop me from engaging in things that I don't want to do. And I'm doing, right? Does that kind of make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
And so then it caused me guilt, shame, and remorse after. So then I had to start looking at progress, right? And as the years went on, it's gotten to a place where it's kind of what I do is acceptable for me, and it doesn't interfere with my relationship. I'm not going to get into that because it's okay for me, but it's no longer those things that cause me guilt, shame, and remorse, and ill feel. Dark. It doesn't take me into the darkness of my soul anymore, where I used to live in that place every once in a while. It makes sense, right?
So if Tony is not able or doesn't engage in applying this solution to this particular problem, what happens? What does it say in the book? We're in a book study. We're not in an opinion study. So we just went through, right? If we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, what happens? Why? It's really important to sort of understand this, right? Because a lot of people get kind of locked up in the idea that if they don't do everything perfectly, they're going to get drunk, right? But there's a sort of a preface here that if we are not sorry and our conduct continues, right? It's the same if on the previous page, right? If we don't want to see our conduct, right? If we don't want God to take us to better things, right? And we continue to engage in this kind of conduct and we ignore spiritual principles, our spiritual condition does what?
Deteriorates.
Right. And what happens when we have no spiritual solution? We drink. And for us to drink is to die.
And you engage in more of the stuff that you don't want to engage in, right? So you're being driven by the human instinct. Right, right, as instant gratification, instant reward, right? That's an instinct-based life, right? So, what they mean by if our conduct continues to hurt others, if you're engaging with somebody who's married, is that hurting other people?
Yep.
If you're manipulating and coercing and right,
or
if you're preying on people,
if you're engaging in a relationship where the person believes that you are more invested than you are, right? If you're running around using people, right? Are you causing harm?
Yep.
Right. So, is this aligning with something that is selfish or not selfish? Right. Is this lining up with our sane and sound ideal for our future sex life? Is this spiritually principled in any way, shape, or form? No, but we have to be able to acknowledge, right?
Yeah.
and being honest. Like, you know what? There's other people who want exactly what you want. So you don't have to lie to people to get what you want. And then you say, we know when we're lying and bullshitting to get something that we want, right? And we really don't want to be invested in it. Oh, yes, I really want to work for 2 days. I don't want a full-time job. I just want to work for 2 days, get some money, and I'm out of here, right? So in honesty, if you know what you're saying, the sound ideas, even if you're in a relationship, you could bring your partner into this exercise, and you can say, this is where we're at. What would you like things to look like? My wife and I, we do every 6 months, once a year, we kind of have a sit down, a business meeting. Here's where we're at, right? Where would you like to go? How would that look like? Are we both in a relationship that we both want to be in? Meaning, are we both invested with the same ideas, principles, and hopes and dreams? Or is one person more happier than the other person? Is one person more at the expense of others? Does that kind of make sense? So we even if you're in a relationship that isn't kind of working, you can make it work by incorporating these principles, by asking your partner, how would you like to see things? I would like to see things the same way. Let's work toward that. Like when the wife and I, when we engage in stuff, we make an appointment when we talk about finances, right? We just don't Shanghai each other like, oh, I'm going to talk about finance. We talk like sensitive. We make an appointment. We say, hey, how about this Sunday? We sit down, we talk about this or do this. When we talk about serious stuff, we don't swear at each other or swear in the conversation.
When you sit down to have these conversations, even when they are in predetermined times and both people know that you're going to engage in a conversation about something specific in your relationship, right? It's always a great idea to ask the other person if they are in fact ready to have a discussion about finances, about sex, about living situation, about whether or not you feel like, I don't necessarily keep that relationships are always 50-50, right? Sometimes they're 80-20, but, it depending on who needs what at what time and who's going through what at what time. But being able to have those kinds of conversations directly with each other, right? What kind of a relationship would that look like?
Very well-flowing, functioning relationship.
Yeah. And it's possible, right? Because I live in one of those relationships on a daily basis. So it doesn't take a special, unique kind of person that can't be found. It takes being able to say to yourself, is this selfish or not? Having a sane and sound ideal, having a spiritual relationship, involving that spiritual relationship so you can live up to that sane and sound ideal, and then approaching the other person as if they are not an extension of yourself, provided to you to give you pleasure and do what you want when you want, but as an individual person with their own autonomy, who you might want to know how they're experiencing the relationship from time to time. Decisions need to be made together, not arbitrarily, right? Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
So here we go. To sum up.
To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome,
Or anything else that you're going through, because we treat this as it's a recipe, right? What worked for Bill, it was a design for living that worked in rough going, right? He had a recipe. We're learning that recipe.
what was the design for living in rough going?
Well, they're going to tell us.
Well, they will, but intense work with alcoholics, right? If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. It's
I
important.
totally misunderstood that the
That's
first
right.
time. That's why sponsorship is very helpful.
But the book said.
I was thinking of their needs, and I was willing to go to any lengths.
But do you see how they take? Do you see how they take the same principle and repeat it throughout the book? Right? They take the same principle and put it in a different context. Oh, a sex problem, a fear problem, a resentment problem, right? Any sort of life problem. What is the answer to that? Involving the spiritual relationship and then going and intensively working with somebody who's having a shittier day than you, right?
Pretty wild, right? Engage in prayer, and who can I help? What can I do? Service, right?
We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. What takes us out of ourselves?
Service.
But specifically, right?
Working with another alcoholic.
12th step, right? Working with somebody else, right? What happens over the course of an hour over a cup of coffee with an open big book? Like, I don't know about you guys, but I haven't thought about myself in the last 45 minutes at all, which is really the reason why I come every Thursday night. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge, when to yield would mean heartache.
To yield, and how many things that like you could make a list of that we yield to that causes problems? Like, you know what, I really need to work. No, I don't feel like going to work. I don't go to work. Or I really need to do this, and I don't do this. Something says you should cut the lawn. I don't want to cut the lawn. Anybody? There's a list of how many different 12-step fellowships are there? There's all these things that are solution to the human perplexities. And we have a list that we find things that create a sense of ease and comfort, yes, followed by uneasiness. Anybody? Anybody have regret of things? I shouldn't have went shy. I shouldn't have did that. And anybody do things where your brain's saying, or inside says, you shouldn't be doing this, but you can't stop yourself from doing it? Come on, I should go to the gym. I did. I drove right by it. That's close enough.
So if we yield to the spiritual principle of working with others, right, and we let this imperious urge take over, right? And here they're specifically talking about sex, or sex that might be considered selfish, right, self-centered, inconsiderate, right? But what Tony's saying is that can be considered with anything, right? So the imperious urge to go into the casino, right? The imperious urge to overeat, to buy things I can't afford and don't need, right? All of these distractions and behaviors around soothing, right? That instead of actually engaging in these spiritual principles and spending the hours that have now been wasted, invested in the helping of other people.
To the precise extent that we permit these things, that we're thinking about life more than we're living it, making excuses for our behavior, rationalizing and justifying our commitments that we're not doing. Anybody have those problems? We all do. That's the human thing, right? Moving from that into a state of, I mean, my sponsor said the best place to find a relationship are those who are in service. They're the most fun people. Because, anyways, you'll get that later. Moving on.
See you running down the street after the girl with a service manual in hand. Yeah. If we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments.
You hear people say, utilize, don't analyze. You got to analyze. Like, they got so many bumper sticker bullshit sayings in AA right now. It's amazing. You could tell the people who haven't done the work, they throw a bumper sticker at it. Right? And they'll argue with you about something they haven't done. That's not right. Where did you learn that? Well, through the process. You don't do 10, 11, or 12 as you do your 9s. You do all your 9s first. What? Where do you learn that stuff? Who's teaching that? Anyways, move on.
We have begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. Where did we learn that? Page 67, right? Although we did not like their symptoms, right?
That's pretty amazing. When you look at where we started from page 63 to page 70, and they're saying, we're hoping you are experiencing this shift. Right? The incorporation of prayer every time you show up now, as soon as you acknowledge. Some of us will spend 2 or 3 days thinking about self, then we'll, oh yeah, prayer. Anybody ever do that? Oh yeah, I'll bring God into it. Once the pain level gets to, oh yeah, God, where's God? But I don't know how God's going to fix this. I thought about it all week. Okay. Come on. Anybody? Yeah, okay. You're not working fast enough, God. Okay, go ahead.
We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can.
So so we've listed the people we've hurt by our conduct. This is the list now that all the people that didn't make your resentment list, your fear list, or your conduct list, you're going to put them on this list. There's a lot of people that didn't make my resentment list, that didn't make my harms list, didn't make my fears list, that were still a part of my consciousness. People have ripped off.
How many people in here have the experience or still having the experience where you think about something that you did to another human being and it actually makes you wince in this moment? Like it takes you immediately out of this moment and you are like just consumed with like very, very intense guilt, shame, and remorse. Right? It doesn't necessarily need to be that intense, right? But, you can start with those kinds of harms first, and usually they start flowing out of you.
And your consciousness will let you know. Like, for me, it was like kicking over mailboxes. Where I grew up, it was either, we had a saying, if you can't steal it, and if you can't sleep with it, piss on it. We used to piss on urinate, piss on everything, right? And so I put urinating in. And then I remember this, oh my God, I was 14 or 15. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. We were drunk and ripped on acid. And we thought it would be a good idea to start at one end of the block and run to the other end of the block on top of the cars. Over the trunk, over the thing, down, laughing our asses off. Took a crunch, 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 crunch. that didn't make my fear. Remember, that was happening a long time. Oh, the amends list. How many people I used to spit on people. I know it's hard to believe.
Some
Get
of
an
them,
argument, just
some
spit
of them
write
don't
it
have
down.
a lot of like feeling involved in them, right? Like you're just talking now, and I had to go and make a financial amends to the city for stealing all the Christmas lights along Douglas Crescent here, right? Like, I don't have any feelings about that. I don't, I don't think about a person who's been harmed necessarily, but this is the city I live in, right? Like, everybody, got up the next day and there were no Christmas lights along Douglas Crescent. I had to go and square away and figure out what the financial cost of that was. And then I needed, later we'll have a discussion about amends. But that's harm, right? That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about, right? There was no resentment in connection with it. There was no real fear about it. I was just out, like I was many nights, thinking, hey, you know what? This is a fucking great idea. I know what we should do next.
How about page 552? That helps me a lot.
Sure, and then so what happens is here, right now, is making the list of the things in our consciousness that come to mind. Like like one of the things I didn't even would have never dawned on me was my mom's dog. It was my dog. And I thought, oh my God, just different things that come to mind that have emotional attachment to it, right? And so when I went to make amends to my mom, it wasn't even on my resentment list or my fear list, but it was on my harms. Why was it on my harms? Because I got drunk with a couple guys. We went through a picture window, right? The dog was sitting outside. It took off. I don't know what happened to the dog. A couple days later, my mom told me that the dog got ran over and it cost $500 to fix. I said to my mom, well, if it would have listened, it would have never ended up in that trouble, never gave it a second thought. Like, that's like, I know, it's a cold stone.
We're just a peach to be around.
I was a real, and as I get sober, I think, oh my God, the piece of work. I was a piece of work. Like, I was in situations where getting envelopes, like celebrations happening. I'm emptying all the money out of the envelopes sitting at the bar. Like, I won't get into the whole situation. Like, I mean, all this stuff that I got into, conduct, treating, and like I know it's hard to believe, but my cheese and cracker weren't even in the same zip code. And I was totally oblivious to any kind of emotional attachment whatsoever. So I talk about all the fights, all the situations, all the conduct, and I put it all down, and my list was pretty long. And then what was attached to it was some emotional deformity. And step 9, God will show you how to make amends for that stuff real fast. I got a job at triage, right? Emergency care worker. And part of the new...
It was psychiatric treatment.
Psychiatric treatment, right? Downtown East Side, right? So we're dealing with all kinds of people. So they want me to clean the bathroom. So I go and clean the bathroom, and there's people pissing all over the bathroom, spitting on the walls. And I cleaned it, and I went to my sponsor. I said, you wouldn't believe this. He goes, God's showing you how to make amends for all those people that had to clean up your stuff. So how long will I have to do this for? God will let you know when your amends done. 5 years. So funny. I cleaned those bathrooms, and I did the best job ever.
You peed on a lot of stuff.
I'd walk to, like, some of us are nuts. I know not you people, fine people, but it was a long weekend, and the machine ate my check and didn't give me no money back. Way back in there. So I pissed all over the machine. And then, every time I got drunk and went by a bank machine, and if I couldn't piss on the machine, I'd piss in between the door crack. Like nuts. Nuts. I'd walk 2 blocks to do it. So, welcome to AA. How are you? A miracle of mental health. Anyways, let's move on.
In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him. Just briefly, if you think about it in terms of what they've just summarized, we have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies. As a result of sort of going through this exercise, we already begin to feel these things to a good extent towards a lot in our 4-step inventory, right? That a lot of these things were released from them now, right? That our list becomes much shorter. Here it says, God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him.
What's the self-will that's blocked us off?
Our fears, resentments.
Fears, very, right? Harms and these are the things that block us off, right? Because as we get spiritually in tune, the selfishness, dishonesty, and inconsistency takes care of itself. We don't need to work on that stuff, right? When these things start to arrive, it's because my instincts are rearing their ugly heads. I'm trying to protect self, right? By involving other people, places, and things. My spiritual condition's sliding. My human condition's taken over, yes? So now I have the recipe to get back in tune with that. And one is pray, and then what? Go find someone to help.
If you have already made a decision, what step is that?
3, 2, 3.
Where do we make a decision? Oh my God. It's not Jeopardy.
Step 1. Oh my God, my brain. I'm so...
If you have already made a decision and an inventory, what step is that?
4.
Of your grosser handicaps, you have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself.
What are your grosser handicaps? Resentment, fears, and that theme will carry through. So real fast, if you look at page 64, right? Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. 64, right? By the time we get to 71, we're hoping you had the same experience we've had, where there's been a shift and you have some form of freedom from self now, that you have the ability to create a shift within your own being. That's pretty wild.
What gives us that ability? What gives us that ability?
Connection with our higher power.
Right. This relationship with something more powerful, more greater than us, right? Or any other human being for that matter.
So the confirmation is we're hoping you're experiencing this. If you're not experiencing it, you're probably not doing the 4-step the way it's laid out, right? And so the next page, it tells us, each time, each chapter will tell us the purpose of the chapter beforehand. How many people find that surprising? Well, what's the purpose of everything that we've done so far? So to page 30, right, it tells us, no, page 44, sorry, it tells us what the preceding chapters are all about, yes? So from page 45 to here, it's going to tell us what the whole purpose of that process was.
You ready? Having made our personal inventory,
Page 72.
What should we do about it? We have been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. We have admitted certain defects.
Okay, so what are the obstacles in our path? Resentment, fears. They're not going to start a whole new conversation. They're not going to treatment center based recovery now of things for you to work on. These are the things that are causing our failure, right? So we've admitted certain defects. What are the certain defects? Resentment, fears. It's pretty okay. Wow, pretty good, huh?
It's important because you hear a lot of conversation like, oh, well, people pleasing is one of my defects, right? People pleasing is an old behavior, right? This kind of language that is not, you don't find any of that in our program of recovery, right? Our defects are specific about self manifested in various ways, resentments, fears, conduct, right? We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We have put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out.
What are about to be cast out?
All these defects.
All fears, resentment, all these things that's causing us our problems that block us out. It's pretty simple, isn't it? And we have a 7th tradition. We're self-supporting through our own contributions. How we close this meeting is with a 3rd step prayer. What kind of help will we need?
God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Read the 5th step this week. Be prepared next week for a conversation in regards to what it says and not what you think. Live long and prosperous. May the force be with you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Who's doing Burger King?
Close. Any questions?
Construction.
Under construction. Oh. It used to be a good one.
Oh, goodness.
Well, it looks like A&W.
Oh, I go for the healthy choice.
What's the healthy choice?
Not A&W or Burger King.
Okay, where you want to go?
I'm good. I'll come anywhere. But
Where you want to go?
I'm going home.
Going home.
My husband is at home.
is that so?
Yeah, I'm going home. I gotta do banking and I gotta get shit. We're going camping.
Are you?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Is this so that what I was thinking of while we were going through this was when Bill says I was testing my newfound thinking.
Yes. The new guy, and he hasn't even left the hospital yet.
Yeah.
And people say, "Oh." Well,
So another question.
Bill was doing 11 and 12 before you started this guy.
Yeah.
Imagine doing your shit now, 11 and 12. Yeah,
Painful stuff.
or even I'll even
Yeah. Another question.
What's that? Okay, listen to A&W. You need, right?
Another question.
Listen to A&W.
So it's funny.
It's on A&W at 200.
If the answers will come if we really want it, right? So some things that we're yielding to, we must not want to get rid of them.
No, it's lack of power.
For lack of power. But what if you say you want to get rid of them?
Lack
If you
of
think it's a good idea,
power. Lack of
but it's hard to.
Have you ever said something you didn't mean?
No.
Oh, you
Your
lying.
whole time in your life,
Come on.
you've never uttered words you didn't
Come
mean.
on.
Oh,
We
I
know
probably
you.
have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But I'm
you
pretty-
definitely
Twice
have.
today so far. A&W did it right now. Hey, you just did. Yeah, you just did it right now.
I'm gonna read
Listen.
I've said a lot of
We're
things
go-
I didn't mean.
Okay, so we're going
Yeah.
to A&W.
And then we can talk about
always miss
yielding.
Thank you for your, hey, so this goes into, they elaborate on, I want to see that your own house is in order. Obviously, you can't transmit something you haven't got.
So the
So
fourth step
see to it is putting your own house in order.
is the beginning of incorporating the recipe.
Yes, and 11 is the developing of it. It's a continuation.
What if you know about the recipe and it sounds like a good idea, but you don't use it?
Then pain. Pain.
It's not. I'm not necessarily speaking for myself.
No, yeah. No, of course. Well, that's, I nearly took your phone and you can have one of those at this
Take
time
it,
of
please,
night.
but just deal with everything that's on it, please.
No.
Oh, couldn't pay me enough.
Oh, you got this? Thank you. Good seeing you. Thanks for the conversation the other day. You know what I ended up getting? Holy one. I said, I got this club. I said, fuck, I haven't taken niacin, no flush niacin. So she went and got me the niacin. So the last 3 days and my everything's getting back on track.
Less anxiety?
And it's just free floating, it's a cloud. I don't know how to explain it. It's just a,
Yes, but you don't have to explain it.
Yeah, okay.
I also take
and then-
niacin.
Yeah, so when I don't take it, it seems to get heavy and I can't shake it.
Yeah, and not everything is based on, your nature. Some of it is like chemical, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Talk about some of this chemical. You guys want to go to A&W? No. Let's go.
Are you coming with us?
no, I'm going home.
You're
So
gonna go.
niacin, niacin, no flushes.
What about fat burger or wild wings? Something not so fast foody. Something with some sustenance.
Where's the pepper?
I might call the next
Wrote it down to talk about Carolyn's questions for.
Need some.
Because I got this one now. I got to eat. I got to eat kind of fast. I don't have time to sit down.
They handed out Jenny Craig fucking worksheets.
You want to do pepper or just A&W?
Man, I already did 5 guys today.
Good for you.
Didn't sound good, did it?
It never does.
Oh, see, I said some things I didn't mean there.
I think that's why. Yeah, I think that's why.
I want to do. I just. I want to. Root beer. Yeah. Let them know what I mind.
You going A-dubs?
Which one?
One on 200.
Yeah, I'll come. You out here, Jamie? Good to see you, bro. Call me anytime, eh?
Thank you. That's a good prayer. That guy's story.
My brother Gary gave me that one in his big book one day.
Yeah.
If you're mad at somebody, then pray for
Yeah.
them.
Here we're trying to learn the mechanics, where it comes from, what to do with it. If it sticks, yeah. It's good. Okay. NW. Hey, Randy. Hey, Randy. We're going over to A&W.